Okay, so get ready to go deep because you've sent over some seriously fascinating excerpts this time around from the Urantia book, paper 196 to be exact, and we're diving straight into the heart of Jesus' faith.
Yeah, this is exciting stuff.
It really is. We're going beyond just kind of the typical religious discussion and really trying to unpack how Jesus lived his faith.
Yeah, you know how it is. It's easy to get caught up in the dogma, the rituals, all that. But what grabbed me about these particular excerpts is how they get into the nitty-gritty of Jesus's experience.
It's true. It's like we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain.
Exactly. It's not just about believing in something. It's about this like lived reality, this concept of Jesus's faith in God as like a constant, not just something you turn to when times get tough.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Imagine having that kind of certainty in your own life. That's what's so striking about this.
It really makes you think.
It really does. Because it wasn't theoretical for him. The book describes it as a living experience of actual spirit attainment. This wasn't just blind faith. It was truly the core of who he was.
And that really challenges us to think about faith differently.
For sure. Like, what if we thought about it less as something we either have or don't have, and more as an active relationship, something we're constantly working on, you know?
Absolutely. And that's a game changer.
I think so. The text even talks about how Jesus went from this early reverence for God to this, like, profound understanding of his oneness with the divine.
It's a journey.
It is. It is. And that's actually something that I think is super encouraging. We tend to put Jesus on this untouchable pedestal. But these texts really highlight the fact that he went through a process of seeking and questioning and ultimately finding that deeper connection with the divine.
And that's something we can all relate to.
Exactly. It makes his journey feel a lot more accessible.
It does, and it shows us that this kind of spiritual growth, it's possible for us too. It's not about becoming Jesus, but about recognizing that same spark of divinity within ourselves.
Totally. So how do we do that? Well, the book actually gives some really practical examples of how Jesus' faith played out in his daily life. Like prayer, for example. It wasn't just something he felt obligated to do. It was a way for him to align himself with God's will, to tap into this source of strength and guidance. What do you make of that?
It's huge because we often see prayer as something we should do, you know, like a chore. But Jesus used it as this incredibly powerful tool for connection.
Yeah, it was like his direct line to the divine. It wasn't about reciting memorized verses. It was about a genuine back and forth.
I love that. It's about aligning ourselves with something way bigger than our own understanding.
So true. And that alignment allowed him to balance his spiritual life with his very human existence. It wasn't one or the other for him.
Right. Like he didn't retreat from the world. He was out there, fully engaged, but from this place of deep faith and unwavering purpose.
Which is really inspiring because, honestly, life can get messy. But he didn't shy away from that. He just faced it head on. And what's interesting is that the text seems to draw a distinction between the religion of Jesus and then religion about Jesus. He talks about how after his death, there was this shift from personally experiencing God to worshiping Jesus himself.
It's like the book is asking us to look at our own beliefs. Are we caught up in dogma and rituals, or are we seeking a real transformative connection with the divine?
That's the million-dollar question. Because if we want to follow in his footsteps, it can't just be about believing in him as this like distant figure. It has to be about embodying his teachings, living them out in our lives.
And that's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking on, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. But it makes you think about what it really means to follow someone, to follow Jesus.
Right. It's not about blindly following a set of rules.
It's about embodying his teachings. And the Urantia book makes it super clear that Jesus wasn't about just kind of like, you know, laying down the law for social climbing or worldly success. It explicitly says his mission was a religious one, and that religion is a deeply personal individual experience.
It's about that inner transformation.
Yeah, that connection with something bigger and letting it radiate outwards.
And one thing the Urantia book really emphasizes is how Jesus always saw the inherent worth in every single person. He called them children of God.
Right. Like we're all in this together.
We are. And that has the power to completely change how we view ourselves and everyone around us.
Absolutely. Imagine if we truly believe that about each other, about ourselves, that we all have this inherent worth, this divine spark.
It's a game changer. And it kind of makes his message timeless, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not about subscribing to a specific belief system, but tapping into this universal truth. We're all connected.
And we're all loved. We all have this potential.
And that potential, according to the book, comes from nurturing our own connection with the divine, just like Jesus did. But how do we do that?
Well, It acknowledges that experiencing God can be, well, elusive, especially in the world we live in. Like, have you ever felt that disconnect?
No, absolutely. Especially when life gets chaotic. It's like, where do I even begin?
It's where faith comes in. And the way it's described in this book, it's not just blind belief. It's more like a deep knowing, like a trust in the goodness of the universe, even when things are tough.
Okay, so it's about taking that leap of faith, but with your eyes wide open.
Exactly. And that's what I find so fascinating about how faith is presented here. It emphasizes this idea of personal experience.
It's like that direct line of communication we were talking about earlier. Prayer, for example.
It's not about begging for favors. It's about aligning ourselves with something way bigger.
So instead of asking, why me, it's more like, how can I serve? What's my purpose?
Right. And that's a powerful shift. It can turn those challenges into chances for growth, those fears into courage, and those doubts into
Unshakable faith.
unshakable faith. Exactly. And it makes me think about how the text talks about how Jesus didn't see the material world as something to escape, you know?
It's like he understood that we're meant to be here now, fully present, the good and the bad. But to approach it all from this place of grounded spirituality. He wasn't about checking out. He was about elevating the whole human experience. And I think that's incredibly relevant today, especially with all the complexities we're facing.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot between the spiritual and the material, you know?
It's like integrating those two sides of ourselves
Yeah.
instead of seeing them as separate. Because they're not. They're both part of who we are.
And that's how we create a life of meaning and purpose. Not by running away from the world, but bringing that spirit of love, compassion, and faith into absolutely everything we do.
It really makes you think about how we often compartmentalize our lives.
Yeah.
There's a spiritual side and then there's everything else. But Jesus seemed to move through it all so effortlessly.
That's what's so fascinating, right? It's like the text is showing us that those two sides, they're not separate. They're meant to be integrated.
It's like that saying, what you resist persists. And Jesus didn't resist his human experience. He embraced it all, the joy, the sorrow, doubt, faith. He was fully human and fully divine at the same time.
And that's what makes this so relevant to us. Because if he could do it, it opens up the possibility that we can too. Not that we'd become divine beings in some literal sense, but that by nurturing that spark of the divine within us, that same potential is there.
It's like we all have this whole other dimension to ourselves that we often ignore. This spiritual side that's just kind of waiting to be explored.
And it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully ourselves.
And the book does offer some guidance on how to do that. It talks about prayer, not as a laundry list of requests, but as a way to connect with that divine source.
Right, that source of wisdom, guidance, strength. And it also talks about the power of love, not just romantic love, but a love that extends to everyone.
A love that sees the inherent worth in every single person, just like Jesus did. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I guess the question I keep coming back to is this. What would my life look like if I truly lived that way? If I approached every interaction, every challenge with that same kind of unwavering faith and love?
It's a question we're sitting with, and I think as you reflect on that, remember what we talked about today about how Jesus saw the world, how he saw each person as a child of God. Just imagine how that radical perspective could change everything.
It's a lot to ponder. And on that note, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to our website and let us know what resonated with you today. What questions are you grappling with? Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, keep diving deep.